Professor Somese. Tell us all about that.
Thank you, Professor. And I want to thank General and Mrs. Dunlap for their gracious welcome and great hospitality. So thank you very much for having me and the whole LENS staff. It's been wonderful. It's very interesting for me as the Coastie, and presume the only Coastie in the room, to be sitting in between two naval officers, or former naval officers. And I thought to myself, well, reminded me of what many of you in the room will ask, the Coast Guard, what is the Coast Guard? What is the Coast Guard? And Ronald Reagan remarked on 18 May 1988, said, people ask me all the time, what is the Coast Guard? And he looked in the eye and said, it's that hard nucleus about which the Navy forms in times of war. So with that, I'm delighted.
Coast Guard's been telling the same joke for so long now.
Since '88. Right. Interesting, the whole conference so far, I find it so fascinating. I think it's a theme that's running through and will continue the next day and a half, is all of us as lawyers, as JAGs, as practitioners are catching up with a new type of warfare. Piracy, the lost, Gitmo, drones, cyber. We're catching up. The law is trying to catch up with modern 21st century warfare. Not always that well, as some will attest to what's going on in Guantanamo and other places, but other places quite well in how we've been proceeding. But I think it's fascinating to watch that, and it's very timely to have this conference, because we do need to be the people that are generating ideas, like the Talon Manual and other items that help people to actually practice within the rule of law, and I think it's to your credit, sir. What is the Coast Guard, all seriousness? We're one of the armed forces. We're the only one with law enforcement authority, both domestic and internationally recognized. And we have broad law enforcement powers upheld by the courts consistently. And as the war on Al-Qaeda continues, you'll look to say we really are a hybrid. The war itself is a hybrid, and the Coast Guard is a mixture of warrior and law enforcement agent. And that's something I think that's been helpful to the Coast Guard and to the country as we've proceeded. We're really a unique component of the national security of the United States. When I say that the Coast Guard originally began, as you know, in 1790, Alexander Hamilton created the Coast Guard as Secretary of Treasury. When the Navy and Army was disbanded, they created the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard continued through, and through the years took on lighthouse service and took on iceberg patrol, oil pollution. And in 1915, we took on the life-saving service, and we became a humanitarian force as well, and stayed in Department of Treasury until 1968, when President Johnson created the Department of Transportation. And we were thrown in there. We said, we'll put something in there. They do buoys. We'll put the Coast Guard in there. Literally. And we went in and we had an identity crisis. I mean, I have come from a Navy family, and my family would kid with me and say, when you're done